In a busy grocery store, the sound of shopping carts rolling over the tiled floor, mixed with chatter from customers, filled the air. It was a typical Saturday afternoon, and the store was bustling with families, friends, and individuals picking up their weekly groceries. Among the shoppers was Marcus, a tall black man in his 30s. He had a friendly demeanor and a warm smile, dressed casually in a comfortable t-shirt and jeans. He was focused on his list, checking off items as he moved through the aisles. As Marcus reached for a box of cereal on the top shelf, he heard a voice behind him. "Excuse me, can you not reach for that?" It was Karen, a middle-aged woman with a sharp, irritated tone. Her hair was styled in a sleek bob, and she wore expensive-looking clothes that seemed to amplify her air of entitlement. She was standing with her arms crossed, glaring at him as if he had done something terribly wrong. Marcus turned around, surprised by her sudden hostility. "I'm just trying to grab this cereal," he replied politely, trying to keep the mood light. "It's my favorite." He smiled, hoping his friendliness would diffuse the tension. But Karen was not having it. "This isn't a place for you," she declared, her voice dripping with disdain. "You don't belong here." Her words hung in the air, heavy with prejudice. Marcus felt a wave of confusion wash over him. Why was she attacking him for no reason? "Excuse me?" he said, his brow furrowing. "I'm just shopping like everyone else. What's the problem?" He tried to understand her perspective, but the hostility in her eyes told him she wasn't interested in a conversation. Karen, sensing his challenge, leaned in closer, her voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. "I don't want trouble in this neighborhood. We don't need people like you coming in here and making things uncomfortable." She gestured around as if to show that they were surrounded by others who might agree with her. Marcus couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had grown up in this city and had always loved the community. He had worked hard to establish his tech company, which focused on helping local businesses thrive. He had dedicated his life to improving his neighborhood and creating opportunities for everyone, regardless of their background. Yet, here was this woman, attacking him simply for existing. Trying to stay calm, Marcus took a deep breath. "I believe everyone deserves respect, and that includes me. Just because I look different doesn't mean I'm not a part of this community," he said, his voice steady. "We should be lifting each other up, not tearing each other down." Karen scoffed at his response. "You don't understand. People like you are ruining this place. It's not what it used to be," she snapped, her voice raised, drawing the attention of other shoppers. A few customers began to look over, curious about the escalating confrontation. Some whispered to one another, unsure of how to react. Marcus felt the weight of their gazes but remained focused on Karen. He wanted to stand his ground without making the situation worse. "Maybe it's time to rethink what people like you really means," he replied, trying to keep his tone even. "Everyone has the right to shop here, to live here, and to be part of this community." He felt his heart race but stood firm, determined not to let her words intimidate him. As the tension lingered, it became clear that this encounter was far from over. Neither Marcus nor Karen was ready to back down, and the conflict that had started over a box of cereal was just beginning. The air was thick with unspoken words, and the atmosphere in the store shifted as more customers took notice, intrigued by the unfolding drama. Marcus stood there, feeling the heat of Karen's words and the eyes of onlookers boring into him. He took a moment to collect his thoughts. He was used to handling difficult situations, especially in the business world. But this was different. This was personal. He wanted to respond to Karen's hostility with grace, but her words cut deep. As the standoff continued, a young mother with her child nearby looked at Marcus with concern. "Are you okay?" she whispered, her voice soft yet filled with empathy. Marcus nodded, appreciating her support. It was small gestures like this that reminded him he wasn't alone, even in the face of ignorance. Turning back to Karen, he decided to try a different approach. "Look, I get that you might have concerns, but I assure you, I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm just a guy trying to buy some groceries like everyone else, he said, his voice calm but firm. He wanted to connect with her, hoping that maybe she could see him as a human being instead of a stereotype. Karen scoffed, her arms still crossed tightly. You don't get it. You can't just come into our neighborhood and act like you belong, she insisted. It's about protecting what we have. Her expression was a mix of anger and fear, as if Marcus's mere presence threatened her sense of security. Marcus took a deep breath, trying to remain patient. But we can't move forward if we keep thinking that way. We all share this space, and it's important to support one another, regardless of our differences. He thought about his own life experiences, how he had faced challenges, but had always tried to uplift others along the way. At that moment, an older gentleman who had been quietly observing stepped forward. I've been shopping here for years, and I've seen all kinds of people come and go, he said, addressing Karen. What matters is how we treat each other, not where we come from. His voice was steady and wise, offering a perspective that made the tension in the air shift slightly. Karen looked taken aback, momentarily stunned by the unexpected support for Marcus. She opened her mouth to respond but seemed to hesitate. Marcus seized the opportunity, hoping to turn the tide. Exactly, he said, glancing at the older man with gratitude. It's about kindness and understanding. If we can't learn to respect each other, we're only hurting ourselves. The mother with the child nodded in agreement, and others around the store began to murmur their support. It was as if a wave of realization had swept through the crowd. They had been watching, and now they were starting to understand the importance of the moment unfolding before them. Seeing the shift in the atmosphere, Karen's expression began to soften, but she still clung to her defensiveness. But what about our values? Our traditions? She argued, her voice quieter now, though still holding an edge. Traditions can evolve. Marcus replied gently. Just because things change doesn't mean they get worse. We can build a community that celebrates diversity and inclusion, rather than one that shuts people out. He could feel the momentum shifting, and he hoped that Karen could see a path forward. Karen glanced around at the growing number of people listening, their expressions filled with curiosity and concern. The realization hit her. She was no longer just arguing with Marcus. She was standing against a collective of people who believed in a different way forward. The tension was still there, but it felt different now. The voices of support began to drown out her negativity, and for the first time, Marcus could see a flicker of doubt in her eyes. He hoped that this could be the turning point, not just for her, but for everyone watching. As Marcus continued to speak, he felt a wave of determination wash over him. He wanted to use this moment to inspire change, to show that understanding could break down barriers. He could only hope that Karen would choose to listen, to open her heart and mind to a new perspective. The battle between old beliefs and new ideas was unfolding right there in the grocery store, and the outcome was still unknown. As the confrontation in the grocery store continued, Marcus felt a mixture of hope and anxiety. He had never expected to find himself in such a tense situation while simply shopping for groceries. With every passing moment, he realized how important it was to stand up against ignorance and prejudice, not just for himself, but for everyone who faced similar challenges. After Marcus spoke, the atmosphere shifted slightly. People were beginning to engage, and some were even nodding in agreement with him. But Karen, still grappling with the crowd's reaction, took a step back, crossing her arms even tighter as if trying to protect herself from the growing tide of support for Marcus. She could feel the weight of their gazes, and it made her uncomfortable. Instead of responding directly to Marcus, she turned to the older gentleman who had spoken earlier. "You've lived here a long time, haven't you?" she asked, trying to regain some control over the situation. "What do you think? Shouldn't we be looking out for our own?" The old man looked thoughtfully at Karen. "I think we should be looking out for each other, no matter who we are. We all have a right to feel safe in our community," he said, his voice steady. "But we also have a responsibility to treat each other with respect. He looked at Marcus and added, "This young man deserves the same respect as anyone else in this store." Marcus watched as Karen's expression began to change. For the first time, she seemed to be considering the impact of her words and actions. But she wasn't ready to back down completely. "I'm just worried about my neighborhood. Things are changing too fast," she replied, her voice softer but still tinged with defensiveness. "You know what?" Marcus interjected gently, sensing an opening. "Change can be scary, but it can also bring growth. My company has been working hard to support local businesses and create jobs for people in our community. We want to make this place better for everyone." He felt passionate about the work he was doing, and he hoped to inspire Karen to see the potential in unity. As the conversation unfolded, other shoppers began to chime in. A woman in her 20s, holding a toddler in her arms, stepped forward. "I moved here a few years ago, and I can tell you, this neighborhood is full of wonderful people. I love seeing the diversity here. It makes the community richer," she said, her voice filled with enthusiasm. Hearing this, Karen looked even more uncertain. She was used to being the loudest voice in the room, and now it felt like she was being surrounded by different viewpoints. The crowd around her was becoming a chorus of support for Marcus, and she was starting to feel isolated. "I don't want to sound rude," Karen said, trying to regain her footing. "But what if this isn't the neighborhood I remember? What if it loses its charm?" Her worry was genuine, but it was still wrapped in a protective shell of prejudice. Marcus saw this as an opportunity to connect with her fears. "I understand that change can be difficult, but charm doesn't come from one kind of person or one culture," he said. "It comes from the stories we share, the relationships we build, and the support we give each other. Every new person adds to that story." At this point, even some of Karen's friends, who had initially stood beside her, began to nod in agreement. They were recognizing that Marcus's message wasn't just about him. It was about the community as a whole. Karen seemed to soften a bit, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. She looked around at the gathering crowd, feeling the weight of their support for Marcus. "I guess I never thought about it that way," she admitted slowly. "I just wanted to protect what I thought was mine." Marcus smiled gently, hoping to bridge the gap. And that's completely valid. But protecting doesn't mean excluding. We can create a place where everyone feels at home, where our differences make us stronger. We just need to work together. The crowd began to buzz with conversation, sharing their own experiences of acceptance and inclusion. Slowly, the atmosphere transformed from one of conflict to one of possibility. People began to see each other not as threats, but as neighbors who could learn from one another. For Marcus, this felt like a small victory. He was seeing a glimmer of understanding in Karen's eyes, a flicker of hope that perhaps she could change. While he knew this conversation wouldn't solve everything, he felt encouraged that they were on the right path. As the discussion continued, Marcus realized that every voice mattered. It was a turning point, not just for him and Karen, but for the entire community. Together, they could build a better future, one where everyone had a place and felt valued. As the discussion continued in the grocery store, Marcus felt a growing sense of hope. He had seen people change their perspectives before, but this moment felt different. The energy in the room was shifting, and he could see that even Karen was beginning to question her beliefs. The crowd around them buzzed with chatter, sharing stories and experiences that celebrated diversity rather than shunned it. While this was happening, Karen stood back, still trying to process everything. She had come into the store with a specific mindset, believing that she was defending her neighborhood. But now, as she listened to the voices of support for Marcus, she felt a sense of unease creeping in. Maybe she had been too quick to judge. Maybe her fear had clouded her judgment. After a few moments, Marcus noticed that Karen's expression was changing. It was as if she was beginning to see the world from a different angle. "You know, I've lived in this neighborhood my whole life," she said slowly, looking around at the crowd that had gathered. "I always thought that meant I had a better claim to it. But I guess I never considered what it would be like for someone new to come in and try to fit in. Encouraged by her admission, Marcus stepped forward. That's an important realization, Karen. Everyone has their own journey. I moved here because I wanted to build something meaningful and give back to a place I felt could be better. But it's a journey for all of us, and it starts with conversations like this. The older gentleman who had previously supported Marcus nodded. That's right. This community has always thrived on its diversity. When I first moved here decades ago, there were people from all walks of life, and they added so much to the fabric of our neighborhood. It's what makes it special. Karen looked thoughtful, her eyes darting around to see the faces of those listening. She noticed the different backgrounds, the smiles, and the sense of unity that was starting to emerge. I guess I've been so focused on my own worries that I never really took the time to see what was happening around me, she admitted. It's easy to feel threatened when you're scared of change. Marcus smiled at her honesty. We all have fears, but facing them can lead to something beautiful. I understand how it feels to be concerned about change, especially when it seems like everything you know is shifting. But if we open our hearts and minds, we can create a community that everyone can be proud of. The atmosphere in the store was shifting from one of confrontation to understanding. Shoppers who had been watching began to share their own experiences of feeling out of place or judged. A young man spoke up, sharing a story about how he had faced discrimination when he moved to the neighborhood. I remember feeling like I didn't belong, he said. But when people reached out to me and welcomed me, I realized I could call this place home. As more people shared their stories, Karen listened intently. She began to see the value in their experiences. Each story was a thread in the larger tapestry of their community, and she was beginning to appreciate how every thread contributed to its strength. Suddenly, a voice from the back of the crowd called out, "Maybe we should organize some community events. Get everyone together and learn from each other." The idea was met with enthusiastic nods and murmurs of agreement. The suggestion felt like a light bulb moment, and Karen couldn't help but feel excited. I would love to help with that, she exclaimed, surprising herself with her enthusiasm. I know this neighborhood, and I could help plan some activities that bring everyone together. Maybe a potluck or a block party. Her face brightened with the thought, and the crowd responded with cheers and applause. Marcus felt a surge of joy at her willingness to participate. That's a fantastic idea. Bringing people together will create connections and show that we're all part of the same community. Karen looked at Marcus and the other shoppers, her previous hostility melting away. I'm sorry for how I treated you earlier, Marcus. I see now that I was wrong. I let my fears get in the way of seeing who you really are. Marcus smiled back, appreciating her honesty. Thank you, Karen. It takes courage to admit when we're wrong, and I respect that. Let's work together to build a better future for all of us. As the energy in the grocery store shifted toward positivity, Marcus felt a sense of relief. This encounter had taken a surprising turn, and he couldn't help but believe that change was possible. With every story shared and every bridge built, they were laying the groundwork for a stronger, more inclusive community. The scene in the grocery store became a turning point, a moment that highlighted the power of dialogue, understanding, and shared experiences. It was proof that when people come together with open hearts, they can begin to heal and grow, building a future that includes everyone. As the excitement from the grocery store encounter began to settle, the idea of a community gathering quickly took shape. Karen and Marcus exchanged contact information, and they agreed to meet the following week to discuss the details. Everyone in the store felt a sense of hope, knowing that they were starting a journey toward a more inclusive neighborhood. The days passed quickly, and the community meeting was set for Saturday morning at the local community center. Marcus was both nervous and excited. He wanted to make a good impression, especially since he was now seen as a representative of change in the neighborhood. He believed that bringing people together would help create a space where everyone felt welcome. On the day of the meeting, the community center buzzed with energy. Tables were set up with colorful banners and flyers announcing the event. The aroma of fresh coffee filled the air, along with the sound of laughter and chatter as neighbors gathered. Marcus arrived early to help set up, and he was greeted by familiar faces from the grocery store encounter. They all looked eager to contribute to the day's activities. Karen was already there, arranging chairs and chatting with some attendees. She seemed transformed, radiating enthusiasm about the gathering. "Marcus, look at all the people who showed up," she said, her eyes shining with excitement. "I think we're going to have a great turnout." Marcus smiled, feeling encouraged by her energy. "This is amazing. It shows that people care and want to connect." He took a moment to look around the room, observing the mix of people, families, seniors, young adults, all chatting and getting to know one another. It was a beautiful sight. As the meeting began, Marcus stood up to welcome everyone. "Thank you all for being here today. This is an important step toward building a stronger community. We all have stories to share, and today is about listening to one another." He could feel the warmth in the room, and he hoped that this would be the beginning of meaningful conversations. After his introduction, Karen took the stage. She looked nervous but determined. "I know I haven't always been the most welcoming person," she started, her voice a little shaky. "But I've learned that it's important to open our hearts and minds to others. We are all neighbors, and we can do better together." Her sincerity resonated with the audience, and a few people clapped in support. With the stage set, the meeting transitioned to small group discussions. Attendees split into different circles, where they shared their experiences, hopes, and fears about the community. Marcus moved from group to group, listening intently as people spoke about their lives. Each story was unique, filled with challenges and triumphs, but there was a common thread of wanting to feel accepted and valued. In one circle, a young man shared how he felt invisible in the neighborhood. "I moved here a year ago, and sometimes I feel like I don't belong. I want to make friends, but it's hard to break the ice," he confessed. The group nodded in understanding, and someone offered to invite him to a local sports league. In another circle, a mother talked about the importance of teaching her children about diversity. "I want my kids to grow up knowing that everyone is unique and that our differences should be celebrated," she said passionately. The group discussed ways to organize events that promote inclusivity for families and children. As the discussions flowed, Marcus noticed Karen standing a bit apart from the groups, looking thoughtful. He approached her and asked, "What's on your mind?" "I just realized how many stories there are in this room." "It's eye-opening," she said, her expression serious. "I thought I knew this neighborhood, but I've only scratched the surface." "Exactly," Marcus replied. "Every person has a story that adds depth to our community. We can learn so much from each other." He could see that she was genuinely reflecting on the conversations, and it gave him hope that she would continue to grow in her understanding. As the meeting wrapped up, everyone gathered for a final discussion. They shared ideas about future events, such as potlucks, cultural festivals, and workshops that would help bridge gaps and promote understanding among different groups. The room buzzed with excitement as people exchanged ideas, eager to take action. Karen stood up once more. "I want to take the lead on planning the next potluck. Let's celebrate our diverse backgrounds through food and stories." The crowd erupted in applause, and Marcus felt a sense of pride watching her step into this new role. As they ended the meeting, everyone left with a sense of purpose and connection. They had taken the first steps toward building a stronger, more inclusive community. Marcus felt a warmth in his heart, knowing that this was just the beginning. With every story shared and every friendship forged, they were creating a neighborhood where everyone could belong. A place where understanding and acceptance would pave the way for a brighter future. As the days turned into weeks, excitement filled the air as the community prepared for the upcoming potluck. Marcus and Karen worked closely together, planning every detail. They wanted the event to be a celebration of diversity, where everyone felt welcomed and appreciated. With flyers spread around town and social media buzzing with announcements, word of the potluck spread quickly. The day of the event arrived, and the community center was transformed into a vibrant space filled with color and warmth. Tables were adorned with tablecloths of different patterns, representing the many cultures within the neighborhood. The smell of delicious food wafted through the air, tantalizing everyone's taste buds. Each dish was a symbol of its creator's heritage, from spicy curries to savory empanadas, from soul food to fresh spring rolls. As people began to arrive, the atmosphere was filled with laughter and chatter. Families brought their children, who ran around excitedly, eager to sample everything. Older residents arrived with smiles, holding containers filled with their favorite recipes. Marcus stood near the entrance, greeting everyone with a warm smile. He felt a sense of pride seeing so many faces come together. Karen, bustling around, was in her element. She introduced herself to newcomers and made sure everyone felt included. "Hi, I'm Karen. What did you bring today?" she asked a family who had just arrived. Her genuine interest made the newcomers feel welcomed, and soon, conversations blossomed among them. As the potluck officially began, Marcus stood up to address the crowd. "Thank you all for coming today. This is what community looks like. Everyone coming together to share their stories and their food." He paused, looking out at the smiling faces in front of him. "Each dish here represents a part of who we are, and that's something to celebrate." The crowd clapped, and Marcus felt a wave of encouragement. "Let's enjoy this food together, and while we're at it, let's share our stories. Who wants to start?" A young woman raised her hand eagerly. "I'll go first," she said, stepping forward. "I'm originally from India, and I made chicken tikka masala. My mom taught me the recipe, and it's one of my favorites. It always reminds me of home." She smiled as she shared her story, and soon everyone was cheering her on. One by one, people stepped up to share. An elderly man talked about his grandmother's famous macaroni and cheese recipe, recalling how it brought the family together every Sunday. A teenager spoke about how her family had emigrated from Mexico and how her abuela's tamales were a staple at family gatherings. Each story added another layer of connection among everyone present. Karen felt a sense of joy watching the connections grow. She realized that the potluck was more than just food. It was a way for people to bond over shared experiences and cultural differences. The conversations flowed freely, and barriers began to dissolve. Neighbors who had never spoken before were now laughing and exchanging contact information. As the sun began to set, the atmosphere was filled with warmth and camaraderie. A group of children played games nearby, their laughter echoing through the center. Older residents shared wisdom with the younger ones, teaching them traditional dances or telling stories from their past. Toward the end of the evening, Karen took a moment to look around. She felt a deep sense of gratitude. The potluck had brought people together in a way she had never imagined. She turned to Marcus, who was chatting with a group of attendees. "I can't believe how well this turned out," she said, her eyes shining with happiness. "It's amazing to see everyone connecting." Marcus smiled back, feeling the same joy. "This is just the beginning, Karen. We've created something special here. I can't wait to see how we can keep this momentum going." As people began to clean up, they continued to chat and laugh, sharing leftovers and exchanging recipes. It was clear that the potluck had sparked a new sense of community. People felt encouraged to reach out and get to know their neighbors better, to build relationships based on trust and understanding. After the last table was cleared, Marcus and Karen stood outside, taking a moment to reflect on the day. "We did it," Karen said, a broad smile on her face. "I never thought I could help create something like this. It feels good to bring people together." "Absolutely," Marcus agreed. "It's about creating a space where everyone belongs. We've laid the groundwork for something beautiful." As they locked up the community center, they both knew that this potluck was more than just an event. It was the start of a new chapter for their neighborhood, a chapter filled with understanding, acceptance, and the promise of a brighter future. Together, they were committed to continuing this journey ensuring that their community flourished in diversity and connection. In the weeks that followed the potluck, the energy in the community remained high. People continued to talk about the event, and many expressed their desire to gather again. Marcus and Karen realized they had tapped into something powerful, a shared sense of belonging that everyone craved. They decided to hold regular community events, each aimed at bringing neighbors together to share their cultures and stories. One Saturday morning, they organized a community cleanup day. The plan was simple: gather residents to clean up local parks, plant flowers, and make the neighborhood more beautiful. They wanted to show that when people work together, they can make a real difference. Karen took the lead on organizing volunteers, reaching out to schools and local businesses for support. The morning of the cleanup arrived, and the sun shone brightly. People gathered at the park, bringing their families, tools, and plenty of enthusiasm. Children ran around excitedly, some holding colorful trash bags, while others wielded small rakes and shovels. Marcus and Karen stood at the front, ready to kick off the event. "Thank you all for being here today," Marcus announced, his voice ringing out over the excited chatter. "Together, we can make this park shine. Not only will we beautify our neighborhood, but we'll also bond as a community." The crowd cheered, and Karen stepped forward to share her thoughts. "This is a great opportunity to connect with our neighbors and give back to the place we all call home. Let's work hard, have fun, and show our pride." Her energy was contagious, and everyone was eager to get started. As they split into groups, Marcus noticed different families working side by side. A family that had just moved in teamed up with an older couple who had lived in the neighborhood for decades. They exchanged stories while picking up trash and planting flowers, laughter ringing through the air. It was beautiful to see how quickly they connected. As the morning passed, Marcus walked around the park, checking in with different groups. He stopped to chat with a young girl who was planting seeds with her mother. "What are you planting?" he asked her, squatting down to get a better look. "Sunflowers," she exclaimed, her face lighting up with excitement. "They'll grow tall and be bright yellow. I want everyone to see them." "That sounds perfect. Sunflowers always make me smile," Marcus replied, feeling a warmth in his heart. It was moments like these that reminded him why he loved being part of this community. Later in the day, as they took a break for lunch, everyone gathered under the shade of a big tree. Karen had organized a simple picnic, with sandwiches, fruit, and refreshments. People spread out blankets, and the atmosphere turned festive. "Let's share what we accomplished so far," Marcus suggested, and the group eagerly joined in. Each team shared their experiences and challenges, celebrating the hard work they had put in. One woman stood up to share her team's story. "We found so much trash, but it felt good to clean it up together. We met new friends while doing it." The group applauded, and the spirit of camaraderie grew stronger. As the picnic continued, Karen encouraged everyone to exchange contact information. "Let's stay connected and plan more events," she said, excitement in her voice. People exchanged phone numbers and emails, realizing they wanted to keep this momentum going. After lunch, they returned to work, planting flowers and shrubs that would brighten the park for years to come. A sense of pride filled the air as they watched the park transform before their eyes. The day ended with laughter, smiles, and a feeling of accomplishment. As they packed up, Marcus and Karen stood back and admired their hard work. The park looked beautiful, and the relationships formed that day would last long after the event was over. "I can't believe how much we achieved today," Karen said, a broad smile on her face. "This was amazing. I feel like we're really creating something special here." "Absolutely," Marcus agreed. "This is just the beginning. We're building a community that cares for each other, and it shows." As they left the park, people waved goodbye to each other, excited about the connections they had made. The cleanup day had not only improved the park, but had also strengthened the bonds between neighbors. With the sun setting behind them, Marcus and Karen felt hopeful about the future. They knew they were on a journey of transformation, one that would continue to grow and evolve. Together, they were committed to fostering a sense of belonging and unity, ensuring that everyone felt welcome in their vibrant neighborhood. The cleanup was a reminder that when people come together, they can create lasting change, one small act at a time. After the successful cleanup day, the community's excitement only grew. People were talking about their next event, eager to continue the momentum. Marcus and Karen decided to host a cultural exchange day, where residents could share their traditions, music, and crafts. The idea was to celebrate the diverse backgrounds of everyone in the neighborhood and to learn from each other. As they planned the event, Karen took charge of organizing booths where families could display their cultures. She reached out to local schools, community centers, and businesses to encourage participation. Everyone was invited to showcase their heritage through food, dance, art, and stories. The response was overwhelming. Neighbors were excited to share what made their cultures unique. The day of the cultural exchange finally arrived. The community center was decorated with colorful banners and flags from various countries, creating a festive atmosphere. Tables lined the walls, filled with delicious dishes from around the world. Marcus and Karen welcomed everyone with smiles as they arrived, feeling a sense of pride in what they had accomplished together. As the event kicked off, Marcus took the stage. "Thank you all for being here today. This is a chance for us to celebrate the rich tapestry of cultures in our neighborhood. Let's learn from each other and enjoy the beauty of our differences." The crowd cheered, and Marcus felt a wave of happiness wash over him. Karen introduced the first act, a local dance group representing traditional Indian dances. The performers took to the floor, dressed in bright, colorful outfits. Their movements were graceful and filled with energy. The audience clapped along, and some even got up to dance with them, laughing and enjoying the moment. After the dance performance, a woman set up a booth showcasing Mexican crafts. She invited kids to come and make papel picado, the colorful tissue paper decorations. Children gathered around the table, excited to cut and design their own creations. Parents watched with smiles, enjoying seeing their kids engage with a new tradition. Nearby, a family displayed traditional Korean food, offering samples of kimchi and rice cakes. People lined up to taste the dishes and ask questions about how they were made. The family was thrilled to share their culture, explaining the history behind each dish. "Food is a way to connect with our heritage," the mother said proudly. "It tells our story." As the afternoon progressed, various booths showcased music, crafts, and stories. A man played the guitar, singing folk songs from his homeland, while others shared traditional games from their cultures. Laughter filled the air as families joined in, creating a joyful atmosphere of unity. Karen took a moment to reflect on the day. She walked around, observing the connections forming between neighbors. People were not just sharing their cultures, they were building friendships. She felt a sense of fulfillment watching the community come alive with excitement and curiosity. Later, Marcus led a group discussion about the importance of embracing diversity. "When we understand each other's backgrounds, we become stronger as a community," he said. "Let's continue to support each other and create more opportunities to learn." Many residents shared their thoughts, expressing how valuable it was to learn about one another. "I never knew about the significance of certain traditions," one neighbor admitted. "This has opened my eyes, and I want to know more." As the sun began to set, the atmosphere was filled with warmth. People gathered for a final group photo, everyone smiling and laughing together. It was a moment of joy and togetherness, capturing the essence of the day. After the photo, they all sat down for a shared meal, enjoying the diverse dishes prepared by their neighbors. It was a feast that reflected the community's heart, filled with flavors, stories, and laughter. As the evening drew to a close, Marcus and Karen looked around, feeling a sense of accomplishment. "This was incredible," Karen said, her eyes shining. "I never imagined we could bring everyone together like this." Marcus nodded, filled with pride. It's amazing what happens when people come together with open hearts. We're building something beautiful here. The Cultural Exchange Day marked a significant milestone in their journey, solidifying the bonds among neighbors. They had created an environment where everyone felt valued and where diversity was celebrated. As they cleaned up and said their goodbyes, they knew this was just the beginning. Together, they would continue to create a vibrant community that welcomed everyone and cherished their unique stories. The warmth and connection established that day would resonate long into the future, ensuring their neighborhood thrived as a place of belonging and unity. As the weeks passed after the Cultural Exchange Day, the sense of community continued to grow. Marcus and Karen had become well-known figures in the neighborhood, and people often approached them with ideas for new events. They felt a strong bond with their neighbors and knew they were building something special. One day, while enjoying coffee at a local cafe, Karen suggested, "What if we start a community book club? It could be a great way for people to connect and share their thoughts on different cultures and stories." Marcus loved the idea. "That's perfect. We can pick books from various authors, reflecting the diversity in our neighborhood." They decided to host the first meeting at the community center. The day of the book club meeting arrived, and Karen was nervous but excited. She decorated the community room with book-themed posters and set up a cozy seating area with cushions and blankets. As people arrived, she greeted them with a smile, handing out snacks and drinks. It felt like a warm gathering of friends rather than a formal meeting. When everyone was settled, Marcus kicked off the discussion. "Thank you all for coming. Today, we're going to talk about a book that explores themes of identity and belonging. It's a beautiful story about understanding oneself and others." The group listened attentively, eager to share their thoughts. As the discussion unfolded, people spoke openly about their personal experiences. One woman shared how the book reminded her of her own journey as an immigrant. "I felt lost when I moved here, but reading this story helped me realize that I'm not alone." "Many people share similar struggles," she said, her voice filled with emotion. Others chimed in, sharing their perspectives. A teenager spoke about how the book's themes resonated with her friendships at school. "Sometimes I feel pressure to fit in, but reading about different experiences made me appreciate my uniqueness," she explained. The conversation flowed naturally, with everyone contributing and learning from each other. As the book club continued, they chose different genres, from fiction to non-fiction, exploring stories that touched on various cultures and experiences. Each meeting became a safe space for sharing thoughts, laughter, and even tears. People formed deeper connections as they delved into the narratives and reflected on their own lives. Karen felt a sense of fulfillment as she watched the group grow. New faces joined each meeting, and friendships blossomed beyond the discussions. Neighbors began to organize their own book swaps, exchanging titles and recommendations. The book club had created a ripple effect, encouraging more interactions among residents. One evening, Marcus suggested they host an open mic night. It could be a chance for people to share poetry, stories, or music. "Let's celebrate our creativity." The idea excited everyone, and soon they began planning the event. They secured a date, set up a stage, and invited the community to join in. On the night of the open mic, the community center was filled with energy. Chairs were arranged in a semicircle, and colorful lights decorated the stage. As people trickled in, they found a welcoming atmosphere, buzzing with anticipation. Marcus and Karen greeted each guest, eager to see the talent within their neighborhood. The event kicked off with Marcus welcoming everyone. "Thank you for coming. Tonight, we celebrate our voices and stories. Everyone is invited to share, whether it's a poem, a song, or a story. Let's lift each other up." The first performer, a shy young man, stepped onto the stage. He played the guitar and sang a heartfelt song he had written about love and belonging. The audience clapped and cheered, encouraging him as he finished his performance. With each act, the audience became more supportive, and soon people were laughing, clapping, and cheering for one another. As the night progressed, a woman shared a powerful spoken word piece about her journey as a single mother. Her words resonated with many in the audience, and tears filled some eyes. When she finished, the room erupted in applause, and people came forward to give her hugs and words of encouragement. By the end of the night, the atmosphere was filled with joy and connection. People who had never spoken before were now sharing laughter and exchanging contact information. The open mic night had turned into a celebration of their community, showcasing the talent and stories of their neighbors. As Marcus and Karen cleaned up after the event, they felt grateful. "This is incredible," Karen said, looking around at the smiles on people's faces. "We've created a place where everyone feels free to express themselves." Marcus nodded, feeling the same pride. It's more than just an event. It's about building a community where we can all learn, grow, and support one another. From that point on, the community became a hub of creativity, learning, and connection. They continued to host events, fostering relationships that crossed cultural boundaries and built a stronger, more inclusive neighborhood. Marcus and Karen knew they had sparked something beautiful, and they were committed to nurturing it for years to come. Together, they were transforming their community into a place of belonging where everyone had a voice and every story mattered.